defense. Is this something that Firouzja is going to play in this tournament? We are going to see as we have knight f3 played.
Kingston defense would mean Firouzja on board. I would love to see that happen. But is it that moment where you perhaps just want a more solid approach to stop the bleeding? You know that things didn't go your way. It was so close. You got everything you wanted. But then Magnus doing Magnus things. And then you try to create your chances with the white pieces. But what we do have is an opening that started with knight f3, but ends up being a Sicilian.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? How sometimes those openings just transpose. You start with knight f3, you transpose into Sicilian, then it transposes into something, and in the end it's London, you know? It's amazing. Bishop b5, now this is the Moscow variation, very, very popular way to play the Sicilian. Bishop e2, this is one of the trends. I mean, dear youngsters, if you're looking at this, you can't really play this unless you're the best players in the world, because normally this makes no sense, but then again, it gives white a pretty straightforward plan. Knight c3, remove the knight, play f4, and that's all you need for a rapid game.
But exactly what you said, right? Because you develop your bishop on b5, you lose a tempo because black anyway wants to try to expand on the queen side. Then you come back to e2. Don't try this at home. We often learn, make your pieces, develop your pieces, don't move them twice. Tough to understand, top level chess, but Magnus first stops that b pawn from moving forward before taking a decision in the center of the board, if whether he wants to develop that knight, perhaps push that c pawn one step ahead and eventually expand in the center. It's a slow start, but it's got the makings of an open position in the middle game.
Yeah, I mean, there is some logic, of course. I mean, the question would be, why bishop b5 check? Why don't you play bishop e2 and d3 immediately? So what Magnus is saying is that after bishop b5, knight e7, your knight on d7 is kind of misplaced because you have to position it on c6. It blocks your bishop. And that's why this is basically a new trend here. He is not taking on the e7, which is one of the main topics of all kinds of anti-Sicilians. He plays bishop e2. Sometimes white plays even knight c3 and d4. This is what I've seen actually being played more and more nowadays. So yeah, Magnus is perfectly happy with the knight on d7. He says this is a fresh position. Let's play it.
Let's play it. And your idea of expanding on the king side as well, I like it. Retreat the knight and push that f pawn, making intentions clear. Magnus first finishes his development, knight c3 played, f4 definitely in the air. And you're pointing out, Magnus won't stop with the f pawn. The g pawn is going to start rolling as well.
Indeed, I think this is one of the ways how white is typically starting this king side attack. Now this feels some sort of a close Sicilian. And Alireza immediately fixes the problem of the bad knight because the knight on d7 is not really great. It's chained together with knight on f6, and that's why he's willing to waste 2 tempi to get the knight on c6. So after those interesting complications in the opening, bishop b5, bishop e2, it seems that Magnus has achieved something, although probably the position is still pretty level.
And meanwhile, our chat has spoken. The poll was up, Magnus versus Alireza, and it's 62% for Magnus, 38% for Alireza. And I have to say, I've seen so many of these polls, 38% against Magnus. The chat believes in Alireza quite a bit. They've seen him do it before, but the way the start has been, I wonder, Arthur, is the number that had Alireza on, it was perhaps even more than 38% before that game one.
Has there ever been a poll where Magnus has had like 38%? Probably not.
It's usually a lot more. The odds are a lot more for Magnus.
Right. So, yeah, indeed. We have so used for him to winning the tournament, so that's why very often, even in polls, he is a big favorite here. I'm not really surprised, but Alireza has proven, Tanya, that he can beat Magnus before, and that's why there's a lot of fans who believe in him. And even this year, after his pretty terrible start, if I may say so, in the FIDE Candidates tournament, which was held in April, Alireza finished, which place was it? I think it was the 7th place out of 8. Ever since, Alireza has been on fire. He won the Bullet Chess Championship, defeated Hikaru Nakamura. He won the Sinkfield Cup, also St. Louis Rapid and Blitz. So he's in a great shape. Got to the finals of the Speeches Championship. So he clearly is one of the 3 best players in the world right now.
I couldn't agree more with you. It's been a fantastic year for Alireza. The Candidates was that one black mark, but apart from that, he's been on fire. He's shown exceptional chess, whether it's over the board, it's online. It feels like the year of the resurgence of Alireza. Everyone was talking about him back in 2020. He's the next Magnus Carlsen. He's going to be the one who'll take the crown. And then something shifted, something changed, and we saw him sort of disappear from the scene for a while. He comes back and he starts striking one after another. And right now he needs to strike back. He's trailing the match. But Alireza has really found his footing once more in the chess world.
Indeed, he has. So now I think he's again rising in the ranks. So exciting times ahead for him and the French chess community. By the way, Queen E1 was played. I like this move because here Magnus is prepping to play something like Queen G3, Queen H4, but also this is a precaution move just in case if Black plays Knight E4, you might have access to Bishop D1. Sometimes this Bishop D1 feels a bit weird move, but I mean, you do protect the pawn on C2. It didn't happen because Alireza decided to play Queen C7. Now the question is, how does Magnus continue his kingside attack? Queen
Magnus
G3?
is thinking about that question as well. And I'm just thinking, we were talking about Alireza's form through the years. It's so easy to forget, Arthas, that he's only 21 years old.
Right, yeah. So he got to the 2800 club at age 18 and 5 months, if I'm not terribly mistaken. He broke Carlsen's record by, something like half a year or so. And now we have new names coming up. So we're living very, very exciting times. Actually, earlier today, with different news, Rigasi did not make it to the 2800 club because today he lost against Adis Gurel. In Bundesliga, we have Gukesh, the world championship candidate, also on the verge of breaking 2800. These youngsters, they keep coming, and it's exciting.
They're coming. They're definitely coming. And right now, Alireza's attack on the king side is coming. Queen to G3, hitting that pawn on G7. Magnus for now saves it with G6. How does white continue the pressure? You want to get F5, but you need to time that really well. It has to work out in your complications. So I think it's a bit early. You still want some of your pieces closer. I'm looking at ideas of developing the bishop, getting that rook from A1 to the central file before striking in with F5.
Actually, what I've tried to figure out, where exactly Firouzja is planning to put his king. Is it really short castle here? Because G6 is a very committal move. And basically, if he wanted to castle Tanya, he had to do it immediately. So if you play G6, then after the short castle, you have a lot of darks for weaknesses. So Magnus right now is trying to figure out what could be this smart intermediate move. There you go, Bishop D2. He's like, do you want to castle long? You got it. I mean, you can definitely do it, but your queen side is quite exposed because I could fire it up with moves like C3, D4 eventually. But again, Firouzja is losing in the match. So maybe the long castle is what he needs.
It's going to be super gutsy if he does go long castle because you're walking into a lot of breaks, a rightly timed A5, a rightly timed B4, or perhaps in the center. But Alireza's last move, H5, I think it's pretty clear that short castle is at least not on his radar immediately. Magnus controls the G4 square, making sure there's no knight G4 jumps at the moment. What do you think? If you had to make a prediction, where is Alireza's king going to find safety?
I'm willing to bet anything. There's not going to be a short castle because it just literally makes no sense. I mean, you're not supposed to play like that. Play G6, H5, weaken your king side, and then hide the king there. This is not how chess works. So I think Alireza, for the moment, wants to keep the king in the center because he knows as soon as he's going to castle, then his opponent is going to launch everything at him. So at the moment, Tanya, I think they're playing a bit cat and mouse game. So he keeps the king in the center to keep Magnus guessing. So are you really going to castle long? Are you going to stay in the center? Fascinating.
Fascinating. And let's point out that last move, H4, it might look like that H-pawn was on pre, but that bishop on E7, X-raying that knight that would have landed there. There are all kinds of tactics here. Knight takes pawn. You could start with just capturing in the center and then eventually winning the piece back. And this would favor black in this position. So H4, not hanging right now. And Alireza says, you know what? I'm not going to think about king safety. My king is safest in the center right now. I want to get my knight to that G3 square. And for some reason, Knight takes pawn still doesn't work. What's going on?
Right. A pawn is a pawn, but can you take it here? I suppose there's again some knight f4, knight f4, queen f4, and bishop h4, and you see the queen on c7 suddenly defends the pawn on f7. It is a possibility, however, not entirely sure. No, Magnus plays rook e1. I think this rook e1, Tanya, is a cautious move just in case to make sure that black is not thinking about some f5 ideas. I was wondering about this move a couple of seconds ago. Maybe black was thinking about f5 and king f7 with the idea to open up the bishop on the long diagonal. All right, bishop f6 is a mistake. I mean, this has got to be some e5, not e4 concrete moves. No, maybe it's not going to work.
I don't understand the question mark because bishop f6 looks like exactly the square you want your bishop in. And apparently, Magnus doesn't find a direct way. Can't blame him. He simply comes back with the knight, rerouting it to the center of the board, also opening up space to expand on the center with his own pawns. Finally, Alireza's king finds safety on the queen side. I'm expecting that h5 knight to land onto g3.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's going to be safety, but indeed, Alireza had to castle already at some point. He's looking for some action here. So Magnus now know that there's a very clear target. So he is going to fire up the queen side with something like b4. You cannot do it immediately because there's after a couple of trades. This is one of the reasons why black positioned the bishop on f6 to apply some pressure here on this diagonal. But Magnus's game is pretty straightforward right now. So cat and mouse game is over here, and it's time to start some action.
And action is coming in with a pawn break at any moment. So black needs to also find a way to keep activity. And I'm just wondering what Alireza might have in mind. The reason I wanted to play knight g3 is to control that e4 square, making sure that at least for the time being, you don't have d4, because the e4 pawn would be tender in that case. And it just feels that for now, you stop a critical break.
Indeed. Yeah, but now this also enables knight e3 because here in the previous position with the knight on h5, black was hitting the pawn on f4. So this closes some doors and opens some others. So there's an immediate change of the position. d5, e5.
So it was Alireza who strikes in the center first with d5, and Magnus blocks it.
Indeed. Now this looks like some sort of a King's Indian attack position. So white typically, or maybe closed French defense position where white is firing up the queens. I'm sorry?
I was thinking French, but interesting.
French,
King's Indian attack as well.
Yeah, I kind of like the system here, but indeed, this does look like French. So knight g4, bishop e3, b4. Black probably is going to have enough time to hide the king on b8, and b4 is definitely pretty obvious for Firouzja that it's incoming. I think Firouzja should be pretty happy with the position here, considering that he lost the first game with the white color. This is a fighting position.
Fighting position, not a single pawn or piece has been traded off. It doesn't get more fighting than that. You know that there are so many dynamics here. Black trying to find a breakthrough against the white king. At some point, perhaps we might see a g5, g4 break coming in at the right time. Meanwhile, white making intentions clear with a b4 or an a5 coming in at the right moment. Alireza first sidesteps from that c line, gets the king to safety. And Magnus, where is he going to strike first? He chooses the b file. I'm expecting b4 next.
Yeah, b4 is incoming, but now I'm trying to understand, Tanya, what happens with d4, because d4 does make sense because black is opening up the bishop on b7 for some pressure here. However, white might just ignore it and then anchor the knight on c4, launching it on d6 or c6. No, Alireza does something else. Well, actually, I like this because here Alireza noticed he suddenly gains access to the e4 square. It's also a pawn sacrifice, technically. Probably you can't really take it just because it feels very dangerous.
It just is so concrete, and it feels like there should be something concrete as well with the d file opening up. Knight e4 ideas always in the air if you were to take on c4. Magnus playing it cagey a little bit. He just blocks it further with the move d4. And now Alireza has this beautiful outpost on e4. Are we going to see a repetition? Do you think this ends in a draw with knight g3, queen f2?
I mean, it could, but it's never going to happen, of course, because Perugia needs to win. But this is officially the funniest repetition of the draws I've ever seen. And we have so many pieces on the board, and the queen. You can't escape with the queen. If you want, you can't do it. Pretty funny. It's not going to happen.
There's no square for Magnus's queen. It's kind of trapped except this one square. So Alireza has a draw in his hand, but he decides not to go for it. He doesn't even repeat it once. He goes for that knight to a5, and eventually the bishop comes to c2. So no more knight e4 anymore.
Indeed. Yeah, I try to picture whose position I would favor here. Now, I started to think maybe indeed I like Alireza's position a bit more because he has a pretty clear target, the pawn on a4, which is sometimes an idea in the French defense. Bishop c6, queen d7, try to apply the pressure on the pawn on a4. You see, if you want to protect the pawn, you have to take on b3 here, which is going to weaken a lot of your light squares. And that's why Magnus immediately goes for a counterattack at the king side, applying some pressure against the pawn on f7. Wait, is there some tricks on bishop g6, knight e6? Not really sure. Here you have to calculate some things here. So bishop g6, f takes, knight e6 probably was not working here. So Magnus is perfectly, of course, happy to repeat the position here. So rook f8, knight h7. I don't think, Tanya, that here the repetition is going to happen. Again, the second possibility for the game to finish into a draw. Do you think it's going to happen? I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think he decides to play on. He answers it before I need to. So first it was Alireza who declined a repetition, a forced repetition, and now it's Magnus returning the favor. So mind games here as well, where he says, I'm not interested to repeat anymore. You had your chance, mister. You didn't take it. You don't get a second one against me. So the knight comes back to f1. I do like this move because that knight on g3 is a bit of a thorn in white's position. You really want to trade off that active knight there. Knight f1, bishop c6, eyeing that weakness on a4. So Alireza says, you can take the g3 pawn. I don't care about that. I will get the h file that'll be open, plus capture on a4. The position's closed, but still incredibly dynamic because the a4 pawn is hanging, the h pawn is hanging. Who would you favor here, Arthurs?
Definitely black. I think black's position is a bit easier to play. I see the evaluation bar is slightly changing the evaluation up and down, but I think that black's plan is pretty obvious here to expand to the queen side, remove the bishop, play a5, b5, b4, hide the king somewhere. The knight on b3 actually is very annoying for black to deal in the wrong run with the stopping off the a pawn. But what slightly worries me here, Tanya, is Alireza's clock because he has only 1 minute and 15 seconds, so the position is still pretty sharp.
It's entering bullet mode, and we know who won the bullet chess championship this year. So Alireza, he needs to keep up that speed. And what you pointed out, look at the way he's advancing pawns which are in front of his own king, because that knight on b3, first there was a knight on g3, now that knight on b3 takes away any activity from white on the queen side. And ironically, it's Alireza who's pushing on the side in which his king is there. I completely agree with you here that yes, clock looks worrying, but position-wise, it looks like a dominating one for Alireza. Now the a-pawn is about to start moving up the board.
That's why Magnus is trying to apply some more gas, apply more pressure to the position, and not give time for Alireza to think. I think he suspects that his position is a bit dangerous here, so that's why he keeps his 3 minutes on the clock. In the first game, it did work. His opponent panicked when he was on the last seconds, but here this position feels to be a bit safer. King b7, here Alireza is prepping b takes, a4, a3, rook a8, a2, pretty simple plan, and Magnus, of course, is trying to do exactly the same at the king side. It's essentially a race.
It's a race between two pawns on either sides of the board, something that you see in an endgame. But when these two are playing against each other, it happens when all the other pieces are on the board. And I really like Alireza's decision here. He's further destroyed white pawn structure and the h5 pawn. Who's defending that? I don't really see a good way for white to hang on for it. Rook from h8 can land up on h6, double up on the h file, and eventually pick up the f6 or the h5 pawn.
Yeah, I think Magnus here is in the trouble, so he needs to come up with some creative way to solve his problems. Maybe find a way to change the course of the game. Perhaps some sort of a c takes, a takes, bishop d2, try to activate the bishop. No, he goes for g4, but still trying to activate the position. F takes, f5, bishop f4. I like this.
That's a big move, especially when your opponent's down to 30 seconds. Even if objectively it's not the best move, practically it makes things difficult because Alireza was not expecting this. It was not on his radar. So suddenly he has to deal with these new problems, calculate these new lines, while in his head he was ready to snatch up that h5 pawn, keep things under control. He decides to take it. Is Magnus going to push the f pawn as well? He first
Actually,
decides to
no.
defend h5.
Yeah, queen h4. I thought he's going to play 5 bishop f4. Maybe there was something that it was not working. It was just a suggestion. Again, Magnus has to work out these tricks very carefully. There you go, a4. Firouzja finally launches forward his queen step on. The threat is pretty obvious, a3, a2. The game is very, very exciting here. Magnus might slightly regret not playing a5 and bishop f4 because now this is not a threat. The bishop is not defended. If you play queen g4 f5, after e takes on f5, you have to take with a queen here. So no, he does it anyway. Wow, that's a pretty weird order of the moves then.
It's a mind-boggling position because we might be seeing two queens on the board at some point. White wants to push that h pawn ahead. Black's coming in with the a pawn. I think Magnus wants to get that rook to e7, but he needs to get the bishop out of the way first. He grabs on b4. Alireza plays king to a6. Wow,
Okay,
explain that move.
How do you even get this position physically on the board? It just feels like from a different century. Somehow, when these two are playing against each other, they get these crazy positions here, completely unbalanced. The black king is on a6, the white king is on g1. Both kings are completely exposed. The pawn structure is completely shattered. Both players have their passed pawns. How do you get here even?
It's an insane position. And that pawn on f6, a target always. I like what Alireza has done. He's taken control of the 7th rank. He's playing on 3 seconds. He's got 3 seconds on the clock. Only a 2-second increment. It's still a wild position. He's probably got the ghosts of that game 1 going on in his head right now, Arthurs. Still too soon to predict a result after we saw what happened in that last game. But look at that move. A huge threat with that knight to d2. I loved it. The computer says it's an inaccuracy. But threats of knight f3, knight e4.
This is a still 3-result game here, and also it feels like a deja vu of the first round game again. Only a couple of seconds. This time, of course, Alireza is trying not to panic. Queen f4, sneak move. Look at this. Queen g5 threat is here. Queen g5. Is it? Can you do it? Queen g5 right now? Can you sacrifice a queen? No, knight f3 instead.
He jumps in, he trades it off. Could have happened, but he's going for more right now, Magnus. Alireza playing on seconds.
I mean, it's impossible to remain accurate. There's so little time on the clock. So here, Alireza plays queen h3, threatening to play g3 and activate his king side. Now, the pawn on h6 suddenly becomes very strong. And I think that, wow, rook takes on f6. Look at that.
And now, Magnus with a shake of his head. He knows that this was a really strong resource, but maybe it gives him a chance because White's king is beautifully placed to enter. Has Magnus done it again? Has he turned this around?
I don't know. I mean, bishop on e6 leaves the pawn on a4 unattended. King b5 is going to be rook b7 check. So again, final seconds for Firouzja. No time to make more mistakes. King c6, probably rook a7 here. I think Magnus should be pretty safe, but Black is trying to play rook g6 and push forward those pawns, so he needs to watch out.
A4 pawn is weak. Magnus Carlsen's king doing a fantastic job on the king side. Alireza Firouzja playing on his last seconds. If he misses out on this opportunity, others, he had another winning position for a second time in a row. It's going to be super difficult to come back. For now, Magnus stops any advance of the g-pawn. He's in complete control of the position.
Right, but also Magnus is down in the last 5 seconds, so the position is very complex here. He would probably not mind repeat the position and then force perpetual check. No, apparently there's a win. There was a min. So, wait, it's a mate. Rook a to c7, rook c6. No, that was a mate on the board. No. Oh my goodness, it just happened so quickly.
A check on the 7th rank, the king coming in further to cement the attack. Black is close to getting checkmated. But there is the threat of rook h6 for king f6
One.
to still everything under control, pushes the king back, players playing on seconds.
Now Magnus is going to run back and try to collect the pawn here. Rook. Again, watch out for the mate threats here. King e7. This king might be the mate threat here. So rook c7, bishop d7. Super, super tense moment here. Both of the players have their passed pawns. And yet the engine says black is somehow slightly better here. This is crazy.
Not anymore. And it's a race one more time. The b pawn is coming in. The g3 pawn is hanging. And Magnus misses something and the f pawn moves forward. It is still absolutely crazy.
Whoa. Oh, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful intermezzo check. There you go. I think Alireza now, is he going to win it? Where do you put the king? That's it. He's running. Magnus is running out of checks. He's going to lose.
Oh my goodness. And Magnus missed it because it's black that's about to checkmate. And Alireza gets the job done. He checkmates Magnus Carlsen. Magnus smiles as well because he knows what a monumental fight this has been. Absolutely insane. Fireworks from both sides. The evaluation bar was going crazy. What a game.
How do I even make